early. But I'd like to give a warm welcome to our presenters, Alyssa Davis and Leila Sherbini. They are joining us from Michigan State University Libraries, and they both are colleagues who work together. Alyssa is and Leila both are media preservation resident librarians. They're working on a congressionally directed grant to digitize early television film footage from WKAR-TV. Alyssa is responsible for workflow implementation, metadata, and database management. She graduated from the University of California at Los Angeles in 2024 with her MLIS, concentrating in media archival studies. And during her time at UCLA, she oversaw metadata quality control and digital file management for the Modern Endangered Archives program, which is an offshoot of UCLA's digital library program. Leila, before coming to Michigan State University, MSU, was based in Chicago, where she worked with various arts and film organizations, including Reeling, the Chicago International LGBTQ+ Film Festival, the Onion City Experimental Film Festival, and the Chicago Film Society. She often freelances as an archival producer or a first assistant director for independent films. And she holds a BA in radio, television, and film from Northwestern, as well as an MSLIS from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I'd like to welcome both Alyssa and Leila this afternoon to tell us a little bit about their film preservation project. I'm very excited to hear all about this.
Thank
I
you.
will pass it over to Alyssa and Leila.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to be here today to talk about our work digitizing and preserving the WKAR Early Television Films collection. So we'll just get right into it.
Okay, so to start, to provide a little bit more background on WKAR and the collection, WKAR-TV first went on the air in 1954, and it is the second oldest continuously operating public television station in the country, oldest east of the Mississippi River. So the collection we are working with is comprised of just under 300 16mm film reels, which is around 110 hours of content. The films we're working with, the first batch was originally accessioned by the University Archives in 2012, and there was a second batch in 2016. But since those two accession dates, nothing has really happened with any of the films. So first and foremost, we've been dealing with films in various states of degradation. Vinegar syndrome has kicked into various levels, and we really prioritize scanning based on degradation level. Some interesting things about the collection: there are around 12 kinescopes, which, if you're unfamiliar with the kinescope, it was a method of recording. For broadcast television, you would point a camera at a TV as it aired the program, and then you would make a film print based on that recording. So that just means we have a couple things in the collection that were perhaps broadcast by WKAR, but maybe not created by WKAR, which we'll get into the interesting problems that poses. And then content really ranges from, instructional videos for home improvement projects, visits to different agricultural sites around the campus, music recitals, children's programs. It really spans the gamut to, paint a picture of life in Central Michigan in the 1950s.
So the project itself was able to happen because in the fall of 2024, the Media Preservation Unit here at Michigan State received a 2-year grant by the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, which is under NARA, to inventory, inspect, and digitize and create metadata for this collection. The grant came in right before the new federal administration, so we're really lucky that the funding was able to come through without issue. And also because this is a grant-funded project, we are pretty secure right now in terms of larger cuts happening at the university. So we're in a very nice situation, thankfully, but it's a rare situation in this day and age, and we realize that. In addition to inventorying, inspecting, digitizing, doing preservation work on these films, we're also capturing both technical and descriptive metadata, which we were luckily trained to do by our amazing cataloging team in-house. And then we're also working with stakeholders across the library, including university archives, which is where the films have come from, special collections, and the digital repository, which is where the films will end up going once they're digitized.
Great. So, as Charles mentioned in his introduction, Alyssa and our titles are Media Preservation Resident Librarian, which is a mouthful. But what that really means for us is that we were brought in as full-time faculty for a fixed-term position. And one of the goals outlined by our now supervisor, Sarah Mainville, was specifically to hire early career librarians. She really wanted this to be an opportunity for us to, break into the industry, so to say, gain experience, and really kind of get an opportunity that a lot of people do, especially in this field where jobs are limited or dependent on grant funding, or folks stay in one position for a while. So as again Charles mentioned, I come from a film production background, and this has kind of allowed me to pivot and combine that love of film into my love of archival, and kind of use that production knowledge to better understand how these films were made, whereas Alyssa has a bit of a different path.
Yeah, just to elaborate a little bit more, I came from a film studies background, and even though I did specialize in media archives at UCLA, it's a very theoretical program. So this really was, when I saw this posting, was an incredible opportunity that it emphasized both hands-on work, seeing a whole media digitization project the whole way through, which is very exciting and not something I had the chance to do in my program.
Yeah, and I think we really wanted to take the time to call this part of the grant and the project out, not just the development, because it really did feel rare to find a position that written into the job description is experimenting and learning and professional development beyond just, we'll send you to conferences, etc. We're really encouraged to explore all the different areas of media preservation, not just digitize the films, don't do anything else, and also librarianship more broadly. So, as we talk through this, this whole video just conference, as we're going through talking about, different ways of resistance, I think kind of using our job descriptions almost as a model for future hiring, I think could be really interesting, just to see what jobs in academic fields or anything can look like when learning is emphasized just as much as work product.
Great. So now we're going to delve a little bit more into the kinds of nuts and bolts of the project itself. And let me get to my slide, sorry. And so we're going to go into depth for all of these aspects in just a moment, but the broad overview is that, we came into this project a few months in already, that students had already started to inventory and inspect film. So when we came in, our biggest to-dos were to figure out the kind of database we wanted to use for this project. The students were already using Airtable to inventory and inspect. Was that something we wanted to stick with or try something different? Would it meet the needs of this large scale project? Um, this project also has the goal of not only being put online in our digital repository at MSU Libraries, but also to end up going to the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is an incredible organization. I recommend you check it out. And so we needed to kind of figure out what kinds of metadata we needed to capture and create for all these different endpoints. Uh, like Leila said, we're really encouraged to experiment. And so figuring out how we could utilize tools that the unit hadn't used before, such as FFmpeg and MediaConch to do our quality control. And then finally, the last piece is thinking through different considerations for access, both in terms of like content access and also like the physical access when you get online, like is it understandable to an audience in terms of captions and things like that? So we're going to dive into that a little bit more.
Yes. So to start off, um, for our database build out, we chose to stick with Airtable, but Alyssa and I essentially did kind of an overhaul of it. And if any of you are familiar with Airtable, there's a couple different ways to approach it. But one of our largest considerations for a project of this scale, primarily because the Media Preservation Unit at MSU has done in-house digitization projects, but for something of this scale, they normally would have sent it out to a vendor. So it was kind of, mass scaling at rapid pace. So one of the things we really considered was how were we going to track and modify records for individual films across the entire digitization process. So because we were using one system from inspection and inventory all the way through compiling our descriptive metadata, it was really important for us to be able to connect um, any records for derivative files to the original physical media. So through a lot of trial and error and research and video scrolling, you can see like we ended up with one overall like project uh base with tables that represent each step of the process. So that includes like working tables for inspection and inventory, digitization, finishing, quality control, and assets, where we kind of compile all the information at the end, as well as some ancillary tables that are just information holding that we then link out, such as signal chains, softwares, users, and a running list of the WKAR programs we come across. So we're able to utilize the asset ID that we assign to the physical object, and that carries over essentially across every single table. Um, and this is really important because we have a team of 5 plus a couple student workers who are all working on the same project at the same time, doing a different step. And so we realized it could be like very easy to have human errors, to just get lost in a film, to duplicate unique IDs, anything like that. And this takes away some of that confusion. Um, and, we found that we were able to do things like utilizing forms for inventory so that our student workers, knew exactly what information to put in, and it helped them kind of learn the process of inspection better, having that outlined. Um, as well as we didn't have to pay for additional seats, which, is just a kind of logistical thing we had to keep in mind. And then part of that kind of learning and exploring Alyssa and I have been doing is um, really diving further into automations. So right now, a lot of our information building has been to make this linking across tables possible. So such as the status field. Sometimes it will say in progress, when we first scan something. But then once our scan is complete, we change the status, and automatically a matching record is created in our finishing table. Um, so Airtable has proven to be kind of an ongoing project for us. So moving forward, we're doing more data cleanup, and we really are planning to dive into automations more to see what it can do for some data population for us rather than just kind of the linking.
Great. Okay, so I'll dive a little bit further into our metadata creation and, why we have the fields we have in our Airtable database, essentially. And that's because this project requires us to uh, kind of capture metadata for three different standards, if you will. So as I mentioned, we have our own in-house digital repository, and they have a mods kind of basic requirements, but then some kind of like odd one-off things as well that don't quite align with anything else. Because all of this information will be cataloged and will be findable through the university archives website, they'll have finding aids. So it needs to also align with our in-house archive space database. And then finally, as I mentioned, the ultimate goal would be really nice is for all of these records to also live in the American Archive of Public Broadcasting's database. And they use PBCore, which is a cataloging standard for the description of audiovisual content. So we had three different kinds of standards we needed to meet. How are we going to do this? Well, as we learn in library school, a crosswalk will get you where you need to go. So I kind of mapped out the different requirements for each. And as you can see here, this was one of our ancillary tables in Airtable. Uh, I mapped out, listed what the PBCore requirement was, the definition for that requirement, what kind of data it needed to be filled in, whether it was coming from a controlled vocabulary, a date, or a text string field, and then whether or not that same field needed to be part of our archive space or digital repository kind of like final data export. So we've been able to have different views in Airtable, which is very useful in terms of showing, we can have a view, this is our PBCore view, this is our archive space view or repo view, to help kind of manage the data a little bit easier. And also, as Leila mentioned, with automations, Airtable also has formulas, so things can automatically populate that way as well, which is how we duplicate a lot of information from like archive space to PBCore and things like that. So we don't have to enter things in multiple times. It can just automatically populate through a formula in Airtable. Um, of course, there's always still kinks we're working out, and a really kind of aspect of this I didn't realize would come into play so much is our communication with our stakeholders. So working with both our university archives and digital repository team to kind of find some compromises in terms of like, can you accept, a title looking this way because it is the first time our archives and digital repository kind of doing video. So there's some different things that they're learning. We're all learning together, and it's been a really good experience so far.
Okay, so the next part of the kind of project development plan that Alyssa and I had to go through was really honing in on our digitization and quality control workflows. So as I believe Alyssa mentioned, part of our grant funding went towards purchasing a laser graphic scan station for the media preservation unit, and we use that scanner for all of our collection films. Um, And we came through and decided on 3 outputs for all of our scans. So we do a preservation file as a 10-bit uncompressed V210 MOV that is then transcoded into an FFV1 Matroska file. Our mezzanine file is a ProRes 42HQ MOV file, and then our access file is an H.264 MP4. So these are all a lot of codecs and terminology that I kind of knew about, and then kind of had a quick deep dive into as soon as we got here. So there's been a lot of work with those outputs, especially with our preservation file. We are currently using FFmpeg to transcode it from that uncompressed V210 into the Matroska file. We do all of our finishing on Adobe Premiere, so any cropping, trimming, adding title cards or content warnings. And then the other, I think, major change, again, for the unit, as I mentioned, we this is one of the larger in-house projects the unit's undertaken, is how we handle quality control, which is what you can kind of see in these screenshots here. We played around with QC tools and quickly realized it didn't really apply to a film-based project such as ours, but we did find out that MediaConch has been so helpful in making the QC process much more efficient. So I went in and I created a WKR specific policy, which you can kind of see outlined here as XML. Taking into account all of the specs we need our 3 digital outputs to meet. And then, as you can see, kind of the interface, how it translates into MediaConch, we're able to just pull the files directly in and immediately get, a check or an X if it fits the profile and move forward. And because, we are digitizing upwards of 300 films, and for each one, we're doing a technical review, a content review, and as well as creating, reviewing, and correcting transcripts and caption files, and doing more subjective work on, video and audio playback. This has been a really great tool for the whole unit to use, and it was incredibly kind of straightforward to implement. So definitely recommend pursuing it for anybody who's, you know, doing handling kind of their own internal QC process.
Great. So I'll finish up talking about the different access considerations we have for this project. I can't name them all here because there's just so many, but I am focusing on 3 major points. So, this content is coming from the 1950s. Some of it could be considered, well, most of it's outdated, but some of it could be considered a little bit problematic in today's world. So how are we going to contextualize this? You know, what kind of descriptions do we need? Things like that. So we actually are currently working on creating advisories, like viewer advisories before each title card for each film, um, if it's deemed necessary for that title and for that content. So we've crafted the language around it and are starting to work on populating that information, just because we want to make sure, anyone coming to this online will understand exactly what they're seeing right up front before getting into the content. I saw someone in the chat ask about copyright. So the great thing is that because WKAR is affiliated with Michigan State University, for the most part, copyright is pretty straightforward. I say for the most part because, as Leila mentioned, we do have some kinescopes in our collection. And that means that, a program could have been created by a different producing organization or entity, such as a different like public television station, but the kinescope could have been created by WKAR. So we're currently trying to parse out what exactly that means for copyright. And we're working on developing a copyright decision matrix right now so that we can have a better idea of how to address those issues when they arise. And then finally, how can we connect this collection to, more more information out there, wider collections how can it just in generally be more accessible to a wider audience? And we decided that one of the ways we would do that is to create agent records for the different people featured in these programs. And so, again, we've worked really closely with our cataloging team. They've been incredible. And so far, we've created 54 name authority file records in the Library of Congress in order to really establish these people in, the larger field, the larger world, have their names be recognized. That's been for me one of the most gratifying experiences of this project so far.
Okay. And sort of to wrap up, um, as we said, one of the major goals beyond from digitizing and then metadata onward is to make these films accessible for students, faculty, researchers, y'all, anyone who's interested. So we are going to be putting everything, bar copyright issues, online on Michigan State University's digital repository. This is, I think, as Alyssa mentioned, like, kind of the biggest digital video undertaking the repository has gone through. So that's exciting. Um, there's a link up there, and we can throw it in the chat after this if you'd like to explore the repository. So far, about 50 of the films that we've digitized are available to be viewed online. And we're adding more films each month as they make it through the digitization process we just walked you through. So by the end of the grant, we're aiming to have at least 80 hours of content available online, if not everything. So fingers crossed for us. It's something we're working towards. What you can see here in this slide is just a view of like the homepage of the collection. So it calls out kind of 3 different programs that are included in the collection, as well as a brief description of the collection itself. Whereas on this slide, this is just a little peek into um, a specific page. So a lot of that work that Alyssa and I were talking about, all of our technical and descriptive metadata work is, it's kind of gratifying to see it for us online. And I think, as we mentioned, um, all of our films we are putting them up with transcripts and closed captions. So trying to make this as accessible as possible. Next steps, we're working with our accessibility team to learn kind of more about audio descriptions and what that entails, but that's kind of a future endeavor. So as for now, this is kind of a little view of the final output of what Alyssa and I have been brought on to do. So with that, thank y'all for listening, and feel free to reach out to us via our emails if you'd like to follow up, but I'm not sure if we still have time for questions or not.